Everyone knew Frank Sutton as the screaming Marine sergeant who tortured poor Goomer Pyle. But those who worked with him tell a different story. A story Hollywood kept quiet for 50 years. The real Frank Sutton wasn't just an actor. He had 14 combat landings in World War II. He flew into active war zones during Vietnam, when other celebrities stayed home. Then one night in Louisiana, everything ended. What his wife found in his dressing room revealed the terrible secret he'd been hiding. Frank Sutton was born on October 23, 1923 in Clarksville, Tennessee. Times were hard back then. The Great Depression was crushing the country, and jobs were hard to find. Sutton's father worked on the railroad, but there was never a guarantee of work. Money was tight, and food was never sure. Frank grew up seeing his parents do all they could to make sure he and his siblings survived. There were long days, tired hands, and patched clothes. It left a mark on him. It taught him to fight for what mattered. When Frank was 8, the family moved to Nashville. They hoped life might get better there. But tragedy hit. When he was 14, his father died of a serious intestinal illness. Suddenly, Frank was the man of the house. There was no safety net back then. Every meal was a struggle. Every penny was counted. Frank had to grow up fast, helping his mother and making sure there was food on the table. It was a tough, painful time that forced him to be strong before most kids even thought of adulthood. And yet there was a spark that kept him going. It was just a small school play, but it changed him. Being on stage felt warm and exciting. Even though his life was full of hardship, that brief moment showed him a different world. It felt like a purpose, like something he could hold on to. Frank kept that feeling close to him in the years ahead. In high school, his passion for acting only grew. At East Nashville High School, he was in the drama club and took every role seriously. Teachers and classmates could see his talent. Even while dealing with schoolwork and responsibilities at home, he never lost his drive. By the time he graduated in 1941, just before America entered World War, the second Frank was certain acting was his path. Even though Nashville was small and his life had been difficult, his dreams were huge. After graduation, Frank took a job as a radio announcer at WJDZM in Clarksville. It was a good fit for a 19-year-old with a big voice and a knack for telling stories. Being on radio sharpened his skills. Every broadcast gave him a taste of the career he wanted. But he never felt like radio was the end of the road. Deep inside, he was sure that something bigger was waiting. In 1942, with war raging, Frank decided to enlist. He dreamed of serving as a Marine. When the medical test showed he was colorblind, they rejected him. Frank was crushed. Being told no over and over because of his colorblindness felt unfair. But he didn't give up. Even when every branch of the military turned him away, he kept pushing. Finally, in 1943, the Army accepted him. It wasn't the Marines, but it was a chance to serve. He joined the 293rd Joint Assault Signal Company of the 6th Infantry Division, a specialized unit that handled vital communications. Frank and his unit saw terrible things. They took part in 14 amphibious landings across the Pacific, places like Lee, Luzon, Bataan, and Corridor. The Battle of Lee in October 1944 was especially brutal, with tens of thousands of casualties, as the Allies fought to free the Philippines. Frank and his unit often landed with the first waves of troops. The risk was huge. Every landing was a fight for survival. These were some of the most dangerous missions in the war. By the end of his service, Frank had been promoted to sergeant. He earned a Bronze Star for bravery and a Purple Heart for wounds sustained in action. These medals weren't given lightly. They told the story of someone who had faced unimaginable danger and never backed down. It's striking that years later, America would come to know him as a TV Marine sergeant when in real life he had earned every stripe and medal in real combat. After Japan's surrender in 1945, Frank was sent to Korea. There he helped produce a radio program called the Military Government Hour. It was part of the U.S. effort to rebuild Korea after the war. Frank wrote, directed, and produced the show using his voice and his creative energy to inform and reassure. It was a very different kind of work. Instead of surviving under fire, he was using his talent to help shape the future of a recovering nation. Frank Sutton came home to Nashville in 1946. A very different man than when he left. He had survived World War II, but now he had a new fight to become an actor. Sutton enrolled at Peabody College, determined to trade his soldier's uniform for a stage costume. During the day, he studied, and at night, he worked at the community theater. Every small part and every long rehearsal helped him feel a little more like an actor and a little less like a soldier. It wasn't easy. And there were plenty of moments when he wasn't sure where this path would take him. By the fall of 1946, Sutton decided to chase his dreams all the way to New York City. It was a bold move. He had very little money and the city was crowded with actors who wanted the same thing he did. Even so, he enrolled at Columbia University to study drama. Every penny mattered. So he lived frugally and stayed focused. The streets of New York felt huge, and the competition was fierce. But Sutton was determined. Columbia was not just a school for him. It was a training ground. Every class and every performance helped him grow into the actor he wanted to be. It was also at Columbia that he met someone who would change his life forever. One day, Sutton was performing a monologue from Hamlet. In the audience was a young woman named Toby Igler. She was captivated by his voice and his presence. After the show, they met and a real connection began to form. Toby admired Sutton's commitment and talent, and Sutton felt like he had finally found someone who truly understood his passion. They fell in love, surrounded by the world of theater, and their relationship gave Sutton strength. With Toby by his side, every challenge at Columbia felt easier to face. But Sutton was never one to take things slowly. By day, he threw himself into work and live television. It was an exhausting schedule. Live TV was unpredictable and demanding, forcing him to stay sharp at all times. By night, he hurried back to Columbia to dive into his classes. It was a life that would wear most people down, but Sutton thrived. Every long day was proof that he was becoming the performer he had always hoped to be. The discipline he learned in the Army was still with him, and it pushed him to go further. Frank Sutton married Toby Igler in 1949. They stayed together for 25 years until Sutton's death in 1974. Their marriage was more than a personal bond. It was also a creative partnership. Toby was a talented writer who found success in daytime television, especially in soap operas. She loved storytelling. She would often give Sutton advice on his performances and career choices. Sutton, in turn, supported her writing ambitions. Together they raised 2 children, Joe and Amanda. Despite the pressures of show business, they kept a stable family life. When Sutton died of a heart attack in 1974, it ended a long, strong partnership built on mutual respect, shared goals, and real teamwork. At 25, Sutton left school for a bold acting opportunity. He had been studying at Columbia University, but he paused his studies to tour with a stage play, The Barretts of Wimpole Street. Even though most actors who played the role of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's father were much older, Sutton took the part. His youth never held him back. Toby, whom he had just married, also joined the tour as a production assistant. The tour gave Sutton valuable stage experience and showed he could take risks for his craft. After it ended, he went back to Columbia and earned his degree. That balance of daring and discipline shaped him early on. Sutton's first stable television work came in 1950. He was cast as Cadet Eric Risen on Tom Corbett's Space Cadet, which ran until 1955. The show was ahead of its time, airing on CBS, ABC, NBC, and Dumont during its run. Its live broadcasts forced Sutton and the cast to hit every mark perfectly. Sutton became a familiar face to viewers who followed the series' futuristic story. The role gave him experience with live television and introduced him to an eager, loyal audience. It was a steady job at a time when television was still finding its feet. In 1955, Sutton landed his first big break in film. He played one of the friends in the movie Marty, a small-budget romantic drama directed by Delbert Mann and written by Paddy Chifsky. Marty told the simple story of a lonely butcher looking for love. It was released on April 11, 1955. Despite its modest budget of $343,000, it earned over $3 million at the box office. Even more impressive, it won the Academy Award for Best Picture and the Palme d'Or at Cannes, one of the few films to do so. Sutton appeared alongside Ernest Borgnine, who won the Oscar for Best Actor. Even though Sutton was not the lead, being part of this success put him on Hollywood's radar. The movie is now in the Library of Congress, as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, a sure sign that Sutton had been part of something special. Through the 1950s and 1960s, Sutton appeared in dozens of television shows. Viewers saw him in episodes of The Twilight Zone, where he played an agent named Frank in the spooky 1962 episode, The Dummy. On Gunsmoke, he was a trusty sidekick in the rough Old West. In The Fugitive, he was part of a series that kept America hooked until its record-setting finale. On The Untouchables, Sutton took on the role of a tough sergeant mixed up in a protection racket, showing a darker side that was very different from his future comedic characters. Sutton also appeared in Maverick, Combat, and soap operas like The Edge of Night and The Secret Storm. He built a strong and diverse body of work, playing many different kinds of roles. By the time he was cast as Sergeant Vince Carter on Goomer Pyle, USMC, Sutton was already a well-known and respected actor who could fit into any part with ease. In the spring of 1964, The Andy Griffith Show introduced a character that would change everything. On May 18th, in an episode titled Goomer Pyle USMC, viewers met Gunnery Sergeant Vince Carter. Frank Sutton played Carter as loud, tough, and nonsense. Jim Nabors was Goomer Pyle, gentle and innocent. That clash was magic. Even though it was only meant to be one episode, the chemistry was obvious. CBS bosses weren't sure a military comedy would work, especially with the Vietnam War looming. But when they saw Sutton and Nabors together, they changed their minds. By the end of the episode, CBS was sold. Sutton's Carter was so real and funny that they greenlit a spin-off almost immediately. They did not wait months or years. It happened fast. Producer Danny Thomas even threatened to take the idea to NBC if they didn't jump. They did. And by September 25, 1964, Goomer Pyle, USMC, was on the air. The show lasted 5 full seasons, 150 episodes. It never left the Nielsen Top 10. Sutton and Nabors became huge television names, and America tuned in every week. On-screen, Sutton's character barked orders at Goomer. Off-screen, Sutton and Nabors were close friends. It was a surprising contrast. Sutton was kind, funny, and easygoing. Nabors thought of him like a brother. Sutton even appeared regularly on Nabors' next show, The Jim Nabors Hour. They stayed close until Sutton's sudden death in 1974. That friendship was never obvious to audiences, because Carter and Goomer fought constantly on the show. Sutton often went out of his way for others. He paid for trips to visit American troops overseas during the Vietnam War. Even as Vietnam grew more controversial at home, Sutton was flying into active war zones to entertain troops. In 1966 and 1967, he gave 56 comedy shows in just 8 days. He went where other performers wouldn't, pushing into areas under fire. That dedication put him in real danger. Sutton never publicized these trips. He covered his own costs and refused payment. It was a quiet, personal mission. Sutton had fought in World War II himself. In the Army, he took part in 14 assault landings in the Pacific and earned a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. The memories of losing friends in combat stayed with him forever. That was why he felt so strongly about going to Vietnam. He once said, "My identification was with young fighting guys. I know what it means to watch a buddy die in a rice paddy, with the stink and the filth." Veterans heard him and knew he was sincere. The Marine Corps was so moved they made him an honorary sergeant. The Texas Navy named him an honorary colonel and naval aviator too. These were not empty gestures. They were real signs of respect. Sutton was one of the few actors to earn this kind of recognition, because he risked his safety to support troops. And Sutton kept going even after returning. From 1966 to 1969, he spent almost every weekend on the road, doing free shows at military hospitals, bases, and USO clubs across America. He would film Goomer Pyle during the week, then travel for hours to perform for injured or homesick troops. He never charged a dime. His routine was so tight he could do multiple shows a day, one after another. Soldiers and Marines remembered him long after they healed. When Goomer Pyle USMC ended in 1969, Frank Sutton didn't just disappear. Right after the show wrapped up, he became a regular on the Jim Nabors Hour, a CBS variety show that ran from 25 September 1969 to 11 March 1971. Sutton was a key part of the comedy sketches in all 51 episodes, often playing a version of his familiar loud character. This time, though, he was the brother-in-law to Jim Nabors' character. Audiences loved seeing him explore a lighter, more domestic kind of comedy. The show stayed in the top 30 for ratings, but eventually ended during the famous CBS Rural Purge, when the network moved away from rural-themed shows. Even so, Sutton proved he could do more than bark orders, and his strong comic timing kept him a favorite. By the early 1970s, Sutton decided to take his comedy on the road. He booked live gigs in Las Vegas and Lake Tahoe, hoping to grow as a stand-up performer. But most people could only see him as Sergeant Carter. No matter what jokes he told, they wanted him to act like the strict sergeant they had seen on TV. That left Sutton in a tough spot. The character had been so powerful that it followed him everywhere. Even though television had given him fame, it also locked him into one role, making it hard to show other sides of his talent. So Sutton went back to his first love, acting on stage. Throughout the 1970s, he appeared in dinner theaters across the United States. One of his most important roles was in Norman, Is That You?, a play that dealt with generational tension and homosexuality, which was a bold subject at the time. Sutton gave a warm, honest performance, mixing comedy with serious emotion. Critics and audiences alike praised his skill. Being on stage let him work closely with the crowd, and freed him from the rigid persona of Sergeant Carter. Sutton thrived in this setting, playing every part with energy and charm. Acting this way was so important to him that he kept going until the very end. In fact, he was preparing for a performance in Shreveport, Louisiana in 1974, when he suffered a fatal heart attack at just 50 years old. Away from the spotlight, Sutton had a rich family life. He had 2 children with his wife Toby. His son, Joseph David Sutton, was born in 1954 and went on to become a successful playwright, creating plays that reflected some of the creative spirit his father had shown him. Sutton's daughter, Amanda Lee Sutton, was born in 1964 and chose a quiet life away from fame. Sutton always made sure to spend time with his family, even when his career kept him busy. Balancing work and family was something he took seriously. In an era when many actors hardly saw their kids, he made sure to put them first. People who knew Sutton off-screen often spoke about the gentle and kind man they knew. On television, he played the loud and angry Sergeant Carter, but behind the scenes, he was affectionate, modest, and deeply committed to his loved ones. His co-workers described him as someone who encouraged everyone around him and gave support to new performers. Sutton himself once joked that despite Sergeant Carter's temper, they both were really gentle people at heart. Frank Sutton was a tough guy on screen, but behind the scenes, his habits were anything but disciplined. For decades, he smoked like a chimney, going through as much as 2 packs of cigarettes a day. He also had terrible eating habits. Greasy meals, junk food, and late-night snacks were his routine as he traveled across the country for work. Back then, most people already knew smoking was dangerous. In the 1970s, doctors had clear proof that smoking raised the risk of dying early by about 50%. It clogged arteries, damaged the heart, and caused long-term changes like making the heart larger and weaker. Sutton ignored all of this. Even as public health campaigns warned people to quit, he kept going, pushing his heart further toward disaster. That wasn't the only problem. Sutton rarely slowed down. After his television fame faded, he stayed busy touring in dinner theater. By the early 1970s, he was crisscrossing America for months at a time. Some weeks, he performed 6 nights straight in different cities. Late-night shows, poor sleep, and constant stress became his new normal. Medical research has long shown that this kind of lifestyle, no rest, bad food, constant pressure, raises blood pressure, wears down the body, and speeds up heart trouble. Sutton knew this, but he kept pushing. His work left him too little time to take care of himself, even as his body began sending clear signals, and those signals weren't subtle. For years before his death, Sutton often felt chest pains. He got short of breath easily. Fatigue followed him every day. These are classic signs of serious heart trouble. Doctors have always urged people to pay attention to them, because they often lead to fatal heart attacks if ignored. Sutton felt these signs often, but he brushed them off as part of his busy schedule or the price of hard work. With a heavy smoking habit and unhealthy diet already making things worse, each day became more dangerous for him. But Sutton never sought serious treatment. That refusal would cost him his life. The worst part is that doctors had already warned him. They told him clearly that his heart was at risk. Some suggested tests. Others told him to quit smoking and take his symptoms seriously. Sutton dismissed these warnings with the same toughness people loved on television. He had a career to protect. He felt that if he showed weakness, it would damage his image. Like many men of his generation, especially those in the public eye, he thought seeing a doctor too often was a sign of frailty. Even as the chest pain and exhaustion increased, Sutton delayed help again and again. That fear ran deep. Sutton had built his reputation on playing strong, commanding men, especially as Sergeant Carter on Goomer Pyle. The thought of admitting to health problems scared him. Family and friends would say later that he avoided checkups and didn't want anyone to see him as weak. That attitude was common in the entertainment world. Many actors believed that to stay on top, they had to hide any personal struggles. Sutton never realized that keeping up the tough guy image would only hasten his end. In June of 1974, all of this caught up with him. Sutton was in Shreveport, Louisiana, preparing for a dinner theater comedy called Love. The Beverly Barn Dinner Playhouse was full of life that night. Audiences had come to see a familiar face they loved. Sutton's wife, Toby, and their 10-year-old daughter, Amanda, had traveled with him for this trip. His 20-year-old son, Joe, stayed behind at college. Sutton was proud to have his family close, and they were excited to see him perform. None of them could have known this would be his final show. That evening, Sutton was backstage going through his usual pre-show routine. Moments before going on, he collapsed in his dressing room. A massive heart attack had hit him so hard that there was no time to save him. Sutton was just 50 years old. His co-star, Elizabeth Ives, stepped in front of the crowd to tell them that Sutton had died. The audience, who had expected a comedy, now sat in stunned silence. They left the theater mourning the loss of someone they thought they knew. The theater shut down Love immediately. Without its star, the show simply could not go on. Sutton's death changed everything. The Playhouse refunded tickets and canceled future performances. It was a sad, sudden end to a promising run. A sharp reminder of the real-life fragility behind the theater's magic. Frank Sutton had been the soul of the show. Without him, there was only an empty stage. He was only 50. Fans across America felt the loss of a television icon. Sutton was someone who had fought in World War II, studied at Columbia University, and gave his heart to entertaining people. Even though most people knew him as a comic sergeant, his colleagues and friends remembered him as a warm, talented actor who loved his work. Towns like Clarksville, Tennessee, later built statues and memorials in his honor, but no tribute could erase the fact that his death was preventable. Following his wishes, his body was brought back to Clarksville, Tennessee. That is where he was born and raised, and where his parents were already buried. Greenwood Cemetery became his resting place, and it quickly became a local landmark. Fans and locals often visit his grave. Some even take part in special cemetery tours that highlight Sutton's life and his lasting impact on entertainment and his hometown. Sutton's roots in Clarksville go back to his parents. They met while working at the local newspaper. Frank spent his childhood between Clarksville and Nashville. After high school, he returned to his hometown to work as a radio announcer. Later, he went on to become an actor who would entertain millions. But Sutton was also a veteran. During World War II, he fought in 14 assault landings in the Pacific. The people of Clarksville remember him as both a Hollywood star and a true American hero. That sense of pride took shape on May 3, 2017, when more than 150 people gathered on Franklin Street. They came together to unveil a life-size bronze statue of Sutton near the Roxy Regional Theater. Local sculptor Scott Wise created the statue capturing Sutton as Sergeant Vince Carter from the classic show, Goomer Pile USMC. It features every detail, including the trademark hat and flaring nostrils. The project took 2 years and was led by civic leader Mark Holloman. Holloman was inspired by talks with Pat Powers, a distant relative of Sutton. Together, they rallied the town and its leaders to honor one of their most famous sons. That day was special. Mayor Kim McMillan spoke warmly about Sutton's role as a favorite son of Clarksville. She talked about his long career and his proud military record. The statue was placed right downtown where Sutton had grown up. That spot draws visitors who want to see it, pay tribute, and remember a man who made people laugh. It reminds everyone that Sutton never forgot his hometown, and that Clarksville never forgot him. His wife, Toby Igler Sutton, also kept his memory alive. They had been married since 1949 and shared a strong and creative partnership until Frank's death. After losing him, Toby never remarried. She was determined to protect his legacy. She wrote, answered fan mail, and spoke up for him. Toby was also a talented writer and made sure that their children, Joe and Amanda, were raised in a home that valued the arts and encouraged thinking for themselves. Joe followed his parents' path into writing and teaching drama.